Hi, sixth grade. Today we are going to be talking about hypotheses. So today's topic really kind of comes about because of us doing lab reports. And we talked about how the first section always on a lab report is a question. So our job as a scientist when we have a question is to answer it. And so a hypothesis is really kind of a special answer. It's a possible answer to a scientific question. So our first I can statement that you really have to know is listed over here on our reflection forms. And so you see here 2.14 is you need to define the term hypothesis. So we know a very simple explanation or a definition for a hypothesis is a possible answer to a scientific question. I know in elementary school they taught you that it's an educated guess, and you will probably have other science teachers who tell you that it's an educated guess, but it is so much more than just a guess. We have a lot of observations that we might have made at this point, and we've come up with this question, and so that hypothesis, it's more than a guess, it's a possible answer. We are fairly certain that our hypothesis will be proven correctly, and that is the whole goal. So I'd really like us to start to kind of elevate our scientific language and use this definition from here on out. If you say that it's an educated guess, I will count you wrong on a quiz. So with your notes, you can see that I started typing this. I'll make it a little bit larger for you so that you can see a little bit easier. So you can see I have my notes up here that were all on variables, and variables is clear over to the margin. So my new section that I'm starting is going to be on hypotheses. So it's clear over to the margin here, and then I always put my definition right after my term. So hypotheses, they're possible answers to a scientific question. And I'll just make this singular. A hypothesis is a possible answer to a scientific question. Now, the other I can statement that deals with reflection or with hypotheses is that you have to be able to write a hypothesis. And you'll notice that this is a 4-point question. So there's a lot that actually goes into writing a hypothesis. And so there are some rules that we really do need to follow. And if we take a look at those here, rules to writing a 4-point hypothesis. First off, our hypotheses should always be in an if-then statement. So you're going to start off with the word if, you're going to put something in there, and then you're going to put the word then, and you're going to end your sentence with a phrase. So I'm going to start my bullet points here. Notice up here is where I push that to get that first bullet point. And so we're going to say if, ... then, ... statement. So it's always written in that if-then pattern. Now, what goes after the if and what goes after the then? This is where knowing your independent and dependent variables is very, very important. So we've done a lot of practice where I might ask a question or write a paragraph or a sentence, and you have to figure out the independent and dependent variables. Now we just have to plug those into our hypothesis. So we'll write the if first, followed by the independent variable. And I'm just going to write IV for independent variable. And then the then is followed by the dependent variable. So looking at this then, one way that I always remember that the if is followed by the independent, if starts with I, independent starts with I. So those two go together. Then we have the dependent variable. So you should have a complete sentence written when you write out a hypothesis. Very, very important to really make us sound educated and to have a strong hypothesis. We know that our variables usually are going to be measurable, especially that dependent variable. The dependent variable has to be measurable. So using words like increase and decrease, that makes our hypothesis even stronger. Now, those words aren't always going to fit in there, but we do want to use it when we can. So when possible, use increase or decrease. And then finally, you have to actually answer the question. So I'm just going to jot that down right now. And then I'm going to give you examples. So I know I kind of did a lot of talking and typing right in a row. So if you want to go ahead and just kind of pause your video and get these notes down, that would be good. Or if you've been pausing it as you've been going along, that's fine too. But I do want to kind of show you some examples and work through some things so that you can really see what I mean. Okay, so here is a good example of a scientific question. Will drinking Mountain Dew increase your risk of diabetes? For some of the periods, this might seem a little bit familiar because I know that we talk about Mountain Dew and my love of Mountain Dew and how horrible it is. So I thought this might be a good example to kind of kick us off here. So when writing my hypothesis, I'm always going to start off with the word if. So I have if. And then I have to identify my independent and dependent variables. So I'm just going to come up here. My independent variable is something that I'm going to be changing. So it's about drinking Mountain Dew. So if I was setting up my lab, I would be testing a group of people who don't drink Mountain Dew and a group of people who do drink Mountain Dew. And then my dependent variable would be the risk of diabetes. So in order to measure that, it would just be, well, do you get diabetes or do you not get diabetes? So now that I have my if, I'm going to insert my independent variable. So if I drink Mountain Dew, then I'm going to follow it with the second part of the sentence, which is then, and I'm going to follow that up with my dependent variable. Then my risk for diabetes will increase. So I followed a few of those rules there. My independent variable, drinking Mountain Dew, is following my if. My dependent variable, the risk for diabetes, is following the then. Now, I didn't use increase in the first part of my sentence, but I did use increase in the second part of my sentence. When I said that you really have to make sure that you're actually answering the questions, this is what I get sometimes from people. If I drink Mountain Dew or don't drink it, then my risk for diabetes will increase or decrease. This doesn't really give a stance on what you think. A hypothesis really is what you think. It's saying this is what I think as my data is going to support once I do my lab. So it's very wishy-washy here. Well, if I drink Mountain Dew or don't drink it, then it might go up or it might go down. You have to be really solid in your answer, and you have to choose one way or another. So I'm going to choose, I'm testing Mountain Dew because I really think that drinking a lot of Mountain Dew is going to increase my risk of diabetes. So I'm going to take out or don't drink it. And then I have to choose. If I drink Mountain Dew, do I think that my risk for diabetes will go down? Or do I think that my risk for diabetes will increase? And so I'm going to choose increase because that's what I think. So this is one way that you can write a hypothesis. Somebody else might write decrease. Maybe if they think that drinking Mountain Dew will decrease the risk for diabetes, but you have to keep in mind when writing your hypothesis that you take in all of your prior knowledge as well, and you take in all of the things that you've read and you've learned about in class, and you're really trying to make this be a true statement of what you think that your data is going to support. So keep that in mind. Sometimes people get a little bit silly when they're writing their hypotheses. So really keep in mind that you're actually answering the question. If you do want more practice, please make sure that you see me during home base. We can always do a lot of small group practice there. Otherwise, we will do more practice in class.